Hello, friends, and welcome to Montessori 101, a live show from Child of the Redwoods, all about the magic of Montessori. I'm Aubrey Hargis.
And I'm David Hargis. So whether you are with us live, hello out there. Thanks for joining us. Maybe you're watching the replay or maybe you're listening to the podcast version. We are just happy you are with us upon it. And if you'd like to know more about our work, head over to our website, childoftheredwoods.com.
Yes. All right. Well, today we have another fun topic, something that Montessorians like to debate and Montessori parents find very interesting when they start observing their children, especially in our primary course.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole lot of this. Yes, I am talking about the two P's.
Pity party?
Because again!
Peppermint Palace.
Pretend play.
Pretend
yes,
play, of course.
Pretend play. It's something that children do a whole lot. And Montessorians have kind of conflicting feelings on it. And we'll kind of get into that and talk about why. But we are really here to I think I can just go ahead and give you a hint and tell you all that like we are pro PP people. We're PPPs. Pro pretend play 4 Ps. Oh my goodness. Okay. No, I'm really losing it. But really, we are pro, and we are going to talk about the power of the imagination and how you can harness it in your Montessori lessons. And in fact, Maria Montessori harnessed it in her Montessori lessons all the time. And so it is not something to be overlooked. And we're going to give an example from one of our themes.
Yeah, that's right. Specifically related to language. In this case, it's something about using your creativity to imagine flying like a bird and so forth. So let's talk about it. What is it about pretend play that strikes fear in the heart of so many Montessorians?
Okay, so this is a fear that goes long back. And Maria Montessori had this revolutionary idea that, unlike Rudolf Steiner, who was around the same time, I think, was creating the Waldorf method of education. And in that method of education, and also Froebel, had his famous kindergarten, of course, where children were encouraged to use their imaginations, with the classic set of blocks, just a set of unit blocks, which basically are in pretty much every home, and if they're not, then they're probably being advertised to parents because they're just those classic wooden blocks, right? So at the same time that these educational theories were going on, Maria Montessori was exploring education from a different angle. And just like Rudolf Steiner, who worked with the children of factory parents in a situation where those parents were really tired and overworked. And, and factory work at the turn of the century could be very, very harsh physically. I'm imagining a lot of these parents probably came home with respiratory issues and just physical ailments. And
it continues to be dangerous. It's dangerous work.
It is dangerous work. And so these were children who that Steiner was noticing were kind of in like a dark, gray, gloomy environment. And he wanted to give them sparkles and glitter and so the Waldorf emphasis on fairies and little gnomes like that arose because of the conditions that these children were facing. And he noticed specifically children really respond well to pretend play. So we'll give them more pretend play in this early childhood. And guess what? Those children thrived in these imaginary worlds.
But I can imagine the Montessorian or a skeptic might say, well, you're just feeding escapist fantasy.
Yes. Well, Maria
This isn't
Montessori,
necessarily
she was
reality.
very grounded, both spiritually, and just she was very, very practical.
She was a
person,
product of her era.
right?
There was the age of naturalism. She was she came from that moment in history, and reflects that, this, the emergence of scientific rationalism in a different way, and, parsing the world and so forth. So she's very much a product of her time.
She was, and she was a trained scientist. She was a trained
Yep.
medical doctor. And so the way she approached these children was from a medical perspective first, and then secondarily an educational one.
That's right.
So in her approach, what she noticed in the work that she did in the Casa dei Bambini, she started working with children who were special needs.
Mm-hmm.
And then she started working with children who were just came from very poor, underserved communities. Right. And what she noticed, and also orphanages, children who were actual literal orphans, she worked with literal orphans also after she developed her first casa. And what she noticed was that these children weren't being taken seriously.
Right.
And so her perspective wasn't, these children are suffering terrible conditions in the world, which they were. So let's, hone in on that pretend play and just give them more of what they're craving, which seems to be more pretend play and fantasy, to just like brighten up and make, also, I don't know, if those of you familiar with Waldorf probably are familiar with like their color wheel, like it's very, very colorful. And so that's all well and good, but Maria Montessori felt like children deserve to be taken seriously. Yeah. And so the Montessori method tends to still have that perspective at the base. Like what we're doing is serious. Like these children are capable of so much more, and we're not just gonna water things down for them. Like
that's right.
The modern version of that would be like, let's give them more Paw Patrol. Let's give them more, whatever these cartoons kids these days are watching.
Kids these days.
You all can tell me. I don't know. Tell me in the chat if what's popular. I would love to know because our kids are so much older right now. But Maria Montessori's response was like, let's not give them more things to pretend play about, more adult created fantasies. Let's let them essentially pretend play and engage in real life activities.
I would assume this is tied to her belief that children were not malformed adults, or rough adults, like rough clay. They actually had a real brilliance and a genius and a divine spark, actually, that they kind of lost as they interacted with the adult world. And so when we infantilize them, we actually are disrespecting that magical, secret, divine thing that's within a child. And so we want to elevate that. We want to give them real work that lets them practice in real ways the things that they are inclined to do, which are serious.
Yeah.
So I could see that, but there's a downside to that too, right? If you take that too far, then you overlook the fact that pretend play is actually really beneficial and natural for children. They use pretend play as a way of understanding and interacting with the world, especially as they are in that earlier sensorial period and they haven't started to connect, what is real and what is not real, as they will in the second plane.
Right.
And so to sort of ignore that or to dismiss it is actually to dismiss what is natural within a child's development. It's to find the trick is to find the balance, right?
Yes.
Like, not to infantilize and give them junk because you want to respect them, but also not to prohibit them from having a joyful, creative life as well.
Yes.
And so I get this question a lot. I know you do too. Like, what's the difference in Waldorf and Montessori? And people ask that because they have this thing in their mind that like one is about fairy tales and imagination and the other is about pink towers and geometry or something.
Right.
and you have to then explain like they're not
but the value of hard work, dishwashing.
That's right.
Pouring, right?
Exactly. Practical life. Come on.
Montessori children work really, really hard.
So practical life is a thing. So, but it's a dichotomy does not have to exist.
No. And, if you sit down and you talk to a teacher who is trained in Waldorf, where everything is supposedly fantastical, you would actually learn that children in Waldorf school settings, they actually do a lot of practical work as well. I think that they have both methods have an emphasis on participating as a community member. I think Waldorf lessons tend to be less individual and more small group. So there are a lot of little differences in between the two methods in practice. But I think that both tend to have a reputation for one or the other type of thinking. And I think you're right. The truth is, good education is a balance and respects the natural needs of the child. And
that's right.
One of the needs of children is to role play.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and to pretend, we call this pretend play, the PP. So pretend play really does have very, very clear benefits for children.
So let's talk about those benefits. What are some of that we know today are the benefits of pretend play?
Well, for one, I'm thinking of my niece who went on an airplane ride for the very first time. Oh, yeah. And then this is like a child that came into her preschool years during COVID, right? Or her toddler preschool years during all the lockdowns. There were no flights available for those years that she might be flying. And then finally, their family started to fly again. And now she's getting to be a more experienced flyer because they live far from family members. And so family members are either flying to them or they are during their vacations flying to go see family for Christmas or spring break or whatnot. And so this was a big deal to a child. Flying is a big deal. Like it involves a lot of bravery. You have to go through several situations that are extremely high stress. I mean, it's high stress for adults too, totally. But think about it from the perspective of a child. As an adult, maybe you have control over some of the elements. Like maybe you picked out your airplane ticket, you purchased it, made the decision about what airline to purchase from, or what website to purchase from, how much you're going to pay for it, and whether it was worth it to pay that money. You know who you're going to go see or where you're going to go. You've probably planned your itinerary for whatever trip you're taking, whether it's work or whether it's family related. And you probably have been on a flight before. I mean, most of us have. Not everybody has, but most adults at one time in their life or another have taken an airplane ride.
They've been on it.
Yeah. And so you know that what happens is you arrive at the airport and you have to park or you have to take a shuttle over, which is kind of sometimes a rare experience.
Or you take the cab or the bus.
Yeah, sometimes there's a little train that takes you into the airport. And so like navigating there is the one thing that we're all familiar. And most of us know that airports are sometimes complicated, right?
Totally.
Like everybody knows if you're going to pick up a friend from the airport, you know that it's like a twist tie of entrances. And so it's a bit stressful, right? You're driving your car and you're like, Terminal B. Oh, take it round. Do we go this way or left or right? Left or right? Left. And then you go left and then you're like, oops, this is actually Terminal A. I misread the sign or, I should have gone right. And then now you have to circle around again. And then you get to, hopefully take the right exits to get you there. And then you park. And so it's kind of like, it's it's kind of stressful, right?
Yeah, and you're probably sleepy because you had to get up 2 hours earlier so that you could catch that.
Maybe you had to wake up in the middle of the night.
6 a.m. flight because it was the cheapest option you could get, or like
your
the
brain's
only
not
way.
firing yet. You haven't had your coffee, and you're trying to make these little decisions.
And then you're rushing to get there, and you're like, I wonder how bad the line is going to be.
What did I forget that's not in my suitcase?
Did I leave something in the car?
Does everybody have their bags? And then you get into the airport, and I got to go through security, and you kind of prep yourself for it. It's going to be stressful getting through, and people are frustrated in line. You have to take off your shoes, or maybe you don't.
You're trying to pack everything you can into your carry-on because they want to charge you $50 to pack a bag.
Exactly. And then maybe they won't even have it on the airplane. Maybe you have to check it anyway. Anyway, there's a lot going on. And then from the child's perspective, they're being shuffled through this. Right. They're just like they're like being dragged along or carried or, most of us parents try to make it as smooth and calm.
Yeah, because the last thing we need is a meltdown.
Don't worry, sweetie. Now we're going to go through security and that's, it's going to be fun. They're going to x-ray our stuff. Right. But actually to you, I see a thumbs up there.
Yeah.
Actually to you, it's not so fun. You're just like, please let me get through the security line. Don't want to miss the flight. And then you get your kid on the airplane and there's like nothing to do. So hopefully you have brought some fun things to do that will last several hours until you reach your destination.
That's
so
right.
It's all a little high stress. And then to the child, like you are literally how many miles in the air? Like thousands of miles in the air?
Well, I think conceptually
I don't know. How high do airplanes go?
Thousands of miles.
Is it thousands of miles?
It's not quite that high, but
not quite.
I don't know that they even conceptualize that they're going
of miles an hour, though. No.
I think it's hard for the child to imagine we're going 500 miles an hour. We're 3-4 miles up in the air, whatever. It's
hard for Aubrey to imagine.
We're in a suborbital. Broken the speed of sound 3 times. Mach 4. We're going to be there any moment.
I know.
Anyway, but I think that's hard to conceive. I think for a child, what isn't hard to conceive is that they are standing on a line or they're being hoisted on your shoulder and they're looking up. Let's say they're standing and it's just a sea of tall legs of people that are not off, that are also stressed and grumpy. And sometimes people are happy at the airport, but I haven't seen that in a real long time because it's a really stressful, expensive,
and scary
experience.
All
totally.
right. So
all that is being processed by the child, right?
Imagine an experience like that. What do most children do in order to process it? They pretend play. And so last time we were at our niece's house, or maybe the time before that as well, we played airplane a lot.
Yeah, this last time we were there over the holidays, you must have played airplane with her all day.
Yeah, like all day for sure. The last day that we were leaving for sure. Like, and from the going and finding a carry-on to pack, where she packed it full of her clothes and all the things that she usually takes, to pretending to drive to the airport, to pretending to board the plane, to what the flight attendant says, or greeting the captain
the TSA
of the plane,
agent
right?
Checking the ticket or the passport or whatever she was imagining.
Aw. Alina says, perfect timing. The first trip to Hawaii is coming up with 4-year-old twins. Oh, nervous. And I've been excited too. It's going to be wonderful, Alina. So you might want to pretend play before you get on the flight. And that is actually what Maria Montessori would say to do with all kinds of situations, is to integrate in this imaginative play and in order to help children process.
That's right.
So to go through some benefits before we share our little activity, the pretend play, and this is, Maria Montessori observed this, and that's why it's incorporated into many Montessori lessons. Not a lot of people know that about Montessori, but it is incorporated because it helps children to process their emotions. It helps them with social and emotional growth. It gives them extra opportunities to practice their expressive vocabulary skills and to develop language. It helps with sequencing. So if we think about that airplane ride, we're thinking from, okay, what is the sequence from the beginning when we wake up? And what Juliet would say was, oh, it's dark outside. Oh, it's so dark. It's nighttime for us, but we're waking up really early. Like that's how the whole pretend play for the airplane ride always started, was like, it's so
because
dark.
it's unusual. It's a strange thing.
Yeah. And then all of the little procedures in sequence, and this is very good for cognitive development. Sequencing is very important.
Yeah, and critical for reading.
It is critical.
Yeah,
yes.
It's one of the really important parts of the reading curriculum.
Absolutely. It allows them to test out dangerous situations. I mean, it is kind of dangerous getting on a plane. I mean, they say it's not as dangerous as being in a car, right? So not that dangerous, but still, like, to our bodies, looking out the window, seeing the world below, it feels
they
like
know that
you have to have a lot of
nervous.
bravery.
They know
right?
that you're nervous.
Well, even if you're not, it's still
but
a
there's
situation
adults.
that requires bravery.
It does require bravery. You're getting in this little strange object. And I mean, it depends on the age of the child, how far they can conceptualize what's happening. But even adults, many adults are nervous flyers, and children will absorb that, whether it's you, the parent, or someone else in that airplane. And so they can take that as a cue, like, oh, this is strange. And people seem scared. So, it helps them to sort of work through that.
Yes. It also allows them to deviate from it, very slight deviations, which is part of developing problem solving. So you also might notice, and I'm going to say this out loud because I know some parents get worried when they see their children do things. But I don't know if you've ever noticed your child acting out like violent situations with their dollhouse toys or their baby, like beating the baby doll or like things that you've never modeled for them.
Why are they wrestling
really
their stuffies?
Scary. Like like seems really scary. Or maybe they pretended that like one of their stuffies died, he's dead, right? Or a baby is dead, gotta put her in a grave, right? Like these are things that sometimes as adults we're like, why are they doing that? They're testing out their bravery. They're testing out situations that they might encounter for real someday in real life, and they're kind of preparing their souls for it, I feel.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, as the child develops to become aware of end of life, they become aware of all these incredibly existentially troubling things that continue to trouble us existentially for the entirety of our life. They're coming into that, and those initial interactions with it are overwhelming, and so pretend play gives them a way to
experience
think through it
without experiencing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so it's important. It's a very healthy thing. And I like the conversation about the flight because I had forgotten about that experience, but you're right. And she must have come to me 20 times that day to have me check her boarding pass or whatever, and it was always the same. Here's the boarding pass. Okay, all right, we're gonna sit down, and then now we've flown, and just over and over and over because it made such an impression, and so she's working through it, but in a good way. And I also am thinking that even as our kids have gotten older, and you probably, many of you out in the audience have done this too, I'm sure, where, you're going to go visit family, you have a special event coming up, you're going to a fancy party, whatever it is. What do? You practice with the kids. You say, like, you set expectations and for behavior or interaction, and then ideally you practice it. So what would we say if somebody said, oh, it's nice to meet you? You would shake their hand and say, nice to meet you too, right? This is actually part of the Montessori curriculum, and it's for a good reason with littles, but we continue to do that. Or you think about as an adult, maybe you're going to give a speech, or you have, at a wedding or whatever, you're going to have to stand up and present. What do? You rehearse it again and again and again. Right. That's a kind of pretend play in a way as well, right? Because you're pretending that you're giving the event as realistically as possible, right? Whether it's swinging the bat or giving the speech or whatever you're doing, and through that comes comfort through the repetition. So we continue to use pretend play, or a kind of pretend play, throughout the entirety of our lives as a way of preparing and comforting ourselves.
Yes. I'm going to give one word of caution because I am a Montessorian.
Yeah.
And that is the word of caution is with media.
Yes.
Because if children are watching, whatever children are watching, it's probably going to appear in their pretend play. And if children do watch a whole lot of a particular show, that has a particular themes, they are 90% likely to retell that same story, instead of using their creative problem solving juices to use real life situations to spark the role play and pretend play.
That's right.
So that is something we actually share with the Waldorf method. In Waldorf, they kind of have a complete ban, I think, on technology and media for littles, especially in early childhood. In Montessori, we tend to be more flexible, but that is the caveat, is that if your children are watching TV, you can expect that is going to influence their role play. But if you take them to a museum or board them on a plane, or share more real life experiences, that is what's going to influence their pretend play. And that is much healthier. So not to, there's no guilt, on the account of having your child watch some shows. Okay. No guilt there. In Montessori, we are more flexible. You need to use, I feel like there's a happy medium and a balance to be had when it comes to media. I really do. Our children were not no media, and I'm not we're definitely not no media people, even as parents of older children. But that is the caveat that I have for you, is the real experiences will actually give your children better experiences with pretend play.
Yeah. So the one I would add to that, we are not no media. You have to find the right path for your own family.
I mean, even books are media, right?
Course,
So
but where we were pretty firm, sort of the compromise, is we really tried to avoid any toys or objects that would allow them to reenact really precisely things that they might have seen in media, so that their play wasn't just a regurgitation. So let's imagine they watch Star Wars and then you buy them a lightsaber and now they just want to go play Luke Skywalker or whatever all the time. If they're wanting to go off and pretend to be a knight, or they want to go off and, they're having some sort of adventure and they're been inspired by the fairy tale story called Star Wars or whatever it is,
the best thing to use would be a stick.
Yeah. So, again, you have to find out what's right for you. But that was like how we as a family decided to kind of mediate between it. Like, we want to let them be aware of the world, and the Western world is just inundated with commercial media,
right?
And so that they had a sense of like their culture, as much as we may dislike or like, the fact that commercial media is overwhelming our culture, it is the reality, and we don't want them to feel left out or not to understand. That was our perspective, but we also did not want to encourage their creative free play to mimic cartoons or media that were written by someone else.
I know. So, not to go too deep into this, but there was that time we went to Six Flags, and our children, or our youngest child, I think, or maybe our oldest, was little and ran into a Batman.
Yeah, that's right.
and he's like, "Hey, little dude, put it there, right? Like, look who it is. It's me. Who am I?" And our kid just like looked at him, and he was like, "I don't know who you are."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Come on, I got the bat wings."
Yeah. Look, it's bat area.
Who could I be? And he was like, "I don't know who you are." Like,
it was a crushing experience for that guy too.
I know. He was like,
"But I look like Batman."
"You don't know who Batman
And we're like, "No, it's
is."
fine, sir. We just don't let him watch comics and things." So.
I know.
You did a good job. You did a
great job. I know. So then we went home, and we were like, "All right, so
yeah, maybe we'll let him know."
Yeah. So then we went through a series of educational showings, media showings. We're like, "Okay,
this
so this is Superman and this is Batman."
Superman does.
I know. So very funny little sidetrack.
Yep.
All right, let's demo this lesson.
Yeah.
So this lesson actually comes from our unit Fly. It is a language creative writing lesson that we encourage children to do in writing if they're capable of writing. but also orally. This is really can work for basically any age child.
Totally.
I would say 2 and up. And if your child is writing, then they can end up writing their own poem using their senses. Oh, Alexis says we had that same experience with Disney. We went on a cruise and my little one had no idea who Mickey was or any of the princesses were. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I get you. I get you, friends. Yeah. I know in sign language, I think the sign is like, we're together on this. Yes. Okay, so so fly. So in this lesson, and we didn't. Oh, you did print out the lesson.
I did, yeah.
We don't have a copy of the whole pretty printed pack. I don't know where it ended up. We'll have to print another one. But this is essentially the lesson itself. It's from one of our earlier themes, so it's not in the new format yet. But it's still the same kind of scripted language.
It's a great lesson.
Yeah. So in this lesson, we would have been doing activities exploring the concept of flight.
Yeah, so there's a building a kite activity. There's a really cool activity where they match bird feathers. We drew bird feathers and we drew birds, and they have to match the feather to the bird.
That is honestly still one of my very favorite of the activities that we've ever created, of the principles that you've ever drawn. I mean, I love that one.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. We did.
So it's like feather to bird.
Yeah, we did a Barrack tablet variation, I think, right, with like heavy, light, and medium weight things.
Yes.
So there's a lot of fun stuff, all related to like flight and aviation and so forth. And this was the way that we incorporated reading, writing, poetry in this case into that thematic unit. And it was to use your imagination. So what is the premise of this?
I'm like, ooh, I actually love this lesson.
It's a good one.
And now I'm putting it in my head. I'm like, let's do more of these for future themes because this is such a fun one. All right, so I am just going to. So this lesson essentially is we've done some activities about birds and we've explored the concept of flight. And so now this says, tell your child you want to do some imagining together. Invite them to close their eyes, take a deep breath, and relax. Tell them that you're going to share a story and you want them to try to imagine it in their head. All right, so here goes. Imagine you are a bird. You've taken off from a fence post and are flying up, up, up into the air. Soaring high up in the sky would be so much fun, and I bet it would feel a lot more different than it does being on the ground. If you look around you, you might see clouds, fluffy white or gray with rain. You might look up and see the bright morning sun or the full moon and the stars. You might look down below and see people as they move. Buildings, restaurants, trees, neighborhoods, forests, all up from above, high over the treetops and the rooftops. You might hear the movement of your wings, the rushing of cars, or the rustling of leaves, the whooshing of the wind. It must feel so different, the way the wind moves through the feathers, or the way the raindrops pitter-patter on your back. While you fly, you might be thinking of where you are headed next, to find more food, or to find a place to rest, or to feed your little chicks. Finally, you have reached your destination. You soar gently down, landing on the branch of a tree. Can you imagine all the things you would see and feel while you were in flight? And then, after we've gone on this little imagination journey, and you can totally paraphrase the whole thing, but it's scripted just in case you want a version to read while your child closes their eyes, or maybe you physically act it out. You have your child stand and, imagine that they're flying with their eyes closed while you read this out loud to them. And then it's time for the poem creation.
That's right.
Now, in a classroom, I remember doing a lot of this style poem when I taught kindergarten, especially. I mean, all the ages, all up through fourth grade, really. But it's but in kindergarten, what I would do is I would actually write these prompts on a dry erase board or a blackboard, or we had one of those big stand-up paper turning.
Oh,
what are they called?
I don't know. I know what you mean, though. Yeah.
There's like an easel, right? A big easel and big pieces of paper. And so I would get out my colorful markers and I would write each of these prompts in a different color. And then as a class, we would fill them in together. And so this is something you can do individually with your own child.
Yeah.
And in Constellation, we give you these templates to fill out with your child. So if your child is not yet writing, you would fill in the blank for them. You would just use this to model the writing process. And if your child is writing, then they can write it right on the template. Why don't you read a few of those things?
Yeah. So
okay, and I'll try and fill it in.
I am a
eagle.
From here.
An eagle.
From here, I can see
the tops of the redwood trees and rocky outcroppings.
When I fly, I feel
a burst of cool wind from the tip of my beak down my back to my tail feathers.
The world around me sounds
noisy because the wind is rushing so fast and I am flying so fast.
Soon I will
find a high branch to land on.
But for now, I am
enjoying the wind.
That's wonderful.
Okay, it's a poem. All right.
Yep.
So, and you don't have to overthink it. You can do little poems like this about you're sensitive about just about
anything. Yeah. So they get, if the child really loves it, or you're in that, you're working on reading. This is one of the core lessons in learning to read in the Montessori method is to do this kind of writing and dictation and sequencing. So, well, what do we say here? We say they're flexing the creative muscles, embracing self-expression, and practicing writing from a different perspective. So, but it's a great one. And so the child responds to it, or you just want to use it again. You can do it in infinite varieties. Imagine you're a whale. Imagine you're a sunflower. Imagine you're whatever it is that you want them to. And I was thinking, I know we didn't do it this way. I know we didn't do this originally, but a few weeks ago we did little books. And I was thinking that this poem could be written in a little book format.
It could.
So if you're curious about I hadn't thought about that until now, but if you were curious about little books and how you could go back and watch that video we did on little books from a few weeks ago. And
so maybe you fill out, instead of a template, you could do a little book.
Exactly.
Or you could use the template to brainstorm.
Yep.
And then make it into
your little book. And then maybe they draw a picture on one side and then they write the word on the other.
Or you write the word.
And they draw the picture or whatever. I mean, there's just a lot of fun things you can do with this concept. Once you kind of get the idea in mind, then you can start to really play with that.
Yes. And in Constellation lessons, we always have a section called Everyone Can Play.
Yeah.
So there's always like little suggestions, like what could you do with your toddler? What could you do with your primary age child? How could you extend the lesson for your elementary age child? So here, some of the little suggestions we have is if you have a toddler, you could act out the journey that you imagine taking if you were a bird. So maybe they need a little more direction in the pretend play part. So I'm imagining, oh my gosh, I'm smiling because it would be so much fun to do this with a little one, right? Like, now let's go fly on our branch, fly through the air. Let's go. Woo, we landed on our branch. Now, what do we feel here? Ooh, what do you smell? What do you hear? So you could really make it into an interactive.
I mean, a little guy, dad wants to pick him up.
Primary kids would love this too.
They would. But yeah, for sure.
Yes. So, and this helps them build a concrete impression of the world. Yep. Okay. And then this says, if your primary child needs help imagining, help them build some concrete impressions by pointing out the view from high places. So you could go up to a second story window and just look out and say, ooh, how does it look different from up here versus down there? What can we see from up here that we can't see on the first floor?
Or top of a hill or a cliffside or whatever you might have in your area. Or if you live in the flatlands like I did when growing up, a picture of someplace from.
That's right.
Yeah.
I know we didn't really have a lot of second story.
Or no second stories or hills, really,
or
out in the
hills.
prairie. But a picture from a balloon or anything that gives them a sense of like the view is different from up here.
Yes. And for your lower elementary, we might ask some extending questions. Here are some of our examples here. How might different birds experience different things in flight? For example, like what might flight be like for an owl versus a little chickadee or a finch?
Mm-hmm.
And, so you might think this might cause you to go and research like the characteristics of the birds or the size of the birds. Totally. Owls might be like, I don't know, they're like really swift flyers down to like catch that rat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Catch the rat and then swoop back up, right? And little chickadees maybe kind of flutter around, or I mean, maybe.
Oh, totally, yeah. Or a hawk versus a hummingbird, or a seagull that can dive. Yeah. So, or pelican. Yeah. So this leads, like you said, to an opportunity for research.
Yes. Yes. Another one is they can even write it from the perspective of a personified plane. How fun would that be? Ooh. Like from the perspective of an airplane taking off. First, I open up my belly. And a bunch of weird two-legged things walk inside.
You're on fire today. And then I go 5,000 miles an hour.
Right. I know. And your elementary child would be like,
exactly. Right? No, but this would be a good, anyway. No, but it actually is a great idea because, again, it leads itself to research. And, yes. That is kind of when we look at the lower elementary curriculum, that's really where we're trying to push the child is into independent study and research. And so a lot of these lessons and things are meant to sort of spark the imagination. And then the child gets curious and like, how many people do sit on an airplane? How fast does a passenger plane go? What is it like? What does it look like to be a pilot? From the pilot seat, can I see a picture? And so researching that kind of, different types of flight. So inspiring that kind of investigation through a creative exercise, like I'm imagining I'm flying.
Anyway, friends, the name of this lesson is called The View from Here, and you can find this in our Constellation theme, Fly. It's available in our shop.
It is in our shop.
Go to childoftheredwoods.com.
That's right.
And go to our shop. You will find that whole theme. The whole thing is really, really good.
Yeah, it's a fun theme.
Fun. Yes. And I know a lot of kids are interested in planes. That would actually be a really great thing to check out if you have an upcoming flight this summer.
Yeah.
Okay. Just throwing that out there.
All righty.
All right. That's it for today.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us, friends.
We will see you next week.
Take care.
Bye.